It was a typical late afternoon, the kind of sky that promised something interesting but didn't quite deliver just yet. I remember every detail like it happened yesterday, even though it's been years now. I was finally heading home after a long stretch of duty in a foreign land, months spent in the heat of the desert, the constant whir of helicopters, and the dry, lifeless air that made you feel like you were walking through a furnace. But now, I was on a plane, cruising high above the clouds, a well-earned first-class seat that I'd finally managed to get after all that time away. I wasn't used to it, the luxury of it. First class. I'd earned it, sure, but it still felt like a little piece of heaven after months of dirt and sweat. I could already imagine the look on my kids' faces when I got Hamimi's son, Mateo, always trying to teach me basketball moves that made no sense, and my daughter, Sophia, curled up with her books, as if she could lose herself in a world that wasn't the one we lived in. Then there was Lena, my wife, the one person I couldn't wait to see. I had it all planned out in my head. The reunion, the embrace, the way she'd hold me close and make me feel like all of the long hours, the dangers, the loneliness had been worth it. But as I settled into my seat, something felt off. You ever get that feeling, like when you're about to get hit with something, but you don't know exactly what? That's what I had, that feeling in my gut. And sure enough, just as I was about to pull out my book, it came. A voice. "Excuse me, sir." It cut through the calm like a knife. I looked up. Standing there, right in front of me, was a flight attendant with a face that looked like it had never smiled in her life. She was about my age, late 30s, and the name tag on her chest said Diane Rathmore. Her eyes didn't meet mine with any warmth, though. No, it was more like I was some kind of inconvenience to her. She glanced at the seat, at my uniform, and then back at me, almost like she didn't believe I was sitting there. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This seat isn't for you." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice calm. "This is my assigned seat." She didn't believe me, though. She snatched my boarding pass from my hand, brushing her fingers against mine as if my skin was something repulsive. "Captain Grayson in first class?" She said it like it was a joke. This can't be right. I wasn't about to let her treat me like that. I wasn't the kind of man who let that kind of thing slide, not when I'd worked so damn hard for it. But before I could say another word, she waved me off and said, "You'll need to move." Now, the tension in the cabin thickened. I could feel the eyes of the other passengers on me, some of them uncomfortable, some of them silently rooting for me, and a few who just wished they weren't involved in this mess. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't some rookie soldier. I'd been through worse than this. I'd earned this seat, and if she had a problem with it, she could take it up with someone else. I met her eyes, locked my gaze with hers, and said quietly but firmly, "I'm afraid I must insist. This is my seat, and I'm not going anywhere." Her face flushed. Her frustration was palpable. "I'm handling this," she snapped. "I'm not going to waste any more time on this." But as her eyes flickered nervously toward the other passengers, a voice broke through. "Ma'am, I think you've got this wrong." Both Diane and I turned toward the source. Standing up in seat 3A was a man who immediately commanded attention. He was older, gray hair, weathered face. And his posture? Military. You could see it in the way he stood strong, unwavering. "That's Captain Grayson," he said, his voice low but carrying. "And unless you plan on explaining to your airline why you just disrespected a soldier who outranks half this plane, I suggest you step back." Diane's face went white. She sputtered, but no words came out. She mumbled something under her breath, gave me one last angry look, and hurried off toward the galley. I couldn't believe it. Someone actually stood up for me. I gave the guy a nod. "Thank you, Sergeant Major," I said. He gave me a short smile. "Some people just can't stand to see a black man in first class," he said, sitting back down. I wanted to laugh, but the weight of the situation was still heavy on my chest. Something about Diane's reaction, it wasn't just about the seat. It felt personal. A few minutes later, a portly man in a sweating brow came to my seat. "Captain Grayson," he said, voice full of insincerity. "We're so sorry for the confusion. Diane's still new, and she's learning. Please accept our apologies." He handed me a voucher for a free flight. I took it. "Thank you," I said, but I could tell it was just a formality. A quick fix to avoid a lawsuit, nothing more. Still, I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to get home. I leaned back, opened my book again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Diane's behavior. Too harsh, too personal. It was as if she had something against me from the start. But why? What was really going on here? Then, everything changed. Turbulence. At first, just a few bumps. Then it got worse. Violent. The plane shook, the lights flickered, and suddenly, a panel above my seat ripped open. A small object fell into my Lapa thumb drive. A message on the digital display flickered. Saw divert to Tulsa. Saw. Tulsa? What the hell? We weren't anywhere near Tulsa. That's when it hit me. Something was going on here, something bigger than just a little seating issue. The flight had been hacked. Diane came to me, wide-eyed. It's worse than we thought, she whispered. The plane's been hijacked. We're being diverted to Tulsa for a package. Package? I asked, confusion and fear mixing in my chest. She looked down. It's a bioweapon, Elias. Something dangerous. That's when everything went to hell. In the cockpit, a hijacker had a gun pressed against the captain's head. He looked at me, cold eyes narrowing, and before I knew it, we were in a fight for control of the plane. The hijacker and I went at it. A fist fight. Desperation. A punch to the gut. A shot that grazed my ear. But in the end, I came out on top. The plane was still in the air, but we weren't in control. I glanced at the pilots. They were shaken, but alive. I turned to the flight crew, and I could see the fear in their eyes. We need to land this thing, I said, my voice calm. But we're doing it the old-fashioned way. And so, with no autopilot, no help, we descended into Tulsa, jarring and completely out of control. We landed hard. The plane skidded to a stop, and a breath of relief swept through the cabin. But I knew it wasn't over. Armed men were waiting on the tarmac. They didn't care about the hijacking. They cared about the package. They surrounded us, guns raised, and they demanded the bioweapon. The tension was thick, and I wasn't backing down. I don't have your package, I told the leader. But you're not going to terrorize these people. He sneered. Hand it over, Captain. We know you have it. But I didn't. And as they began searching the plane, I knew one thing. Something wasn't right about this. And it wasn't just about the bioweapon. Finally, in the cargo hold, they found it. A VY Lu of clear liquid. A VY Russ. Something that could wipe out millions. And then I understood. This wasn't just about hijacking a plane. It was about something bigger. A threat to national security, and we were all caught in the middle. As we stood on that tarmac, watching the authorities take Diane away, I couldn't help but wonder, what happens when the truth is buried under layers of fear and greed? What happens when the fight for justice is more than just about one person's seat? I'm Captain Elias Grayson. I stood up for what was right. But what about you? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Share your thoughts. Comment below. Let's talk about what justice really means.